Hi, I'm Rob Dahm, and this is compression testing a rotary outside of the car. He got me an oil filter.
We went to Mazda.
Oh yeah.
This has a higher oil relief or whatever.
Nice. That is probably the best unboxing we've ever had. Why, pray tell, do you have housings when neither of us need housings?
You need what you don't need.
Anything related to rotary, that is probably the most accurate thing. You don't need it.
I need this, so he needs this.
Oh shit.
From the old dusty stuff that never gets touched.
That is one hell of an exhaust port. As you guys see, I got all the semi-P housing machining done. Just
Forgot he did it way back when.
yeah, I forgot all about it. What has transpired over this entire time is that semi-peripheraling a housing is a new thing to me. Can it be done? Yes. I've seen it done from Chips and other guys. As much as I don't use him, I think that his work quality looks really good, and I think the way he does semi-Ping looks really solid. It looks like the type of thing I would want. I don't have the time to make all that. I don't have a lathe, so I can't make the plug to put in and then machine it out. I can do it, but listen, you can hear the machine working right now, making parts for the 4-rotor. So this isn't as high of a priority, nor is using my time to do that. Ultimately, I think when we go to semi-P the 4-rotor, or both 4-rotors, I have 8 housings to do, and I'll do it then. But this saves us a lot of time. We're gonna go with like a really nice, clean, standard Pineapple Racing primary port, secondary port, not bridge port. That's just a bonus to their template. So that way we get a little bit more air in and out. This engine now is gonna breathe really well. The other thing we're gonna have to do is machine the lower intake manifold, and then Isaiah will do all of the work he does to make that lower intake manifold work perfectly. We're still going to have it where the semi-peripheral is connected just to the secondary runner. It's a lot easier to maintain mentally, and we're still using the stock throttle body. But I want to point out, on the 3-rotor, we found out that it's almost like a free-for-all party. That difference on a turbocharged engine between having it all separate wasn't really noticeable, or important enough to be noticeable. But I still want that sort of control. She's mad that I don't pet her enough, which is the answer is all the time. She's like, don't you dare do that again.
I could get her to leave me if I did.
That's not what she wants, though.
She's just tolerating it. Such a baby.
She is a baby. There, that's what that.
Yeah, that's what she wants.
I think that if she's in the right mood, she could snap your neck, pushing your head up. She's like,
she's actually really strong.
Mm-hmm.
When she does that, like, I'm like, geez, how, like, I want you to be in her skin.
yeah. Due to the nature of having my engines all stud and doweled, one of my biggest fears was always, oh well, somebody else is going to have to do it if I need to replace parts, and this is exactly the case, and thankfully I was prepared for that. So these are the semi-P housings, and so I need to dowel them for all my dowels and studs and all that sort of stuff. I have the program saved, and I have my little plate here to help make this process repeatable, because I can throw the next housing on. At least the 2 housings will absolutely match, but I've designed it in a way so that way I can just tee off of this thing, do some calculations on my computer, and then center it off of this, and then do all the rest of the holes, just like I did on the old ones. We're gonna see how my consistent code, the stuff I've had for months now, holds up stacking this engine together with parts from different eras of time. You know that naturally, even if you do the same code, something always changes. Well, we'll see how consistent I can be. Spaghetti. Those are looking really good. Definitely trying some different things, but at the end of the day, that's the result. Yeah. That's with this slightly oversized reamer. Just because I'm getting better at it, I actually have to make the reamer oversized for what I'm trying to do. Okay, so the next, that one vibrated a little bit. That's good. Okay, so this is an existing one from the motor. We'll set it on top of the two main dowels first.
You just put it over there and just do it like that, and then it'll come up pretty good. If you press that button right there, you know,
just like that, they're both done. That took a total of 9 minutes. Okay, so I'm going a little slow to be safe. Here's the problem with getting used equipment. You have to be very careful. Simply put, look at this. These are the two of the new housings. New. You can see that they aren't even aligned on these, and there's no wiggle room. Like it just press fits in and it wedges the two. That's horrible. Get that kind of lined up there and then have to... And then what pisses me off to no end is that they're not even lined up to each other. The combustion chambers are way off. Everything's all fucked. So I'm gonna run these only because that's what we have a CNC machine for. So I'm gonna clean that up and then we're getting ready to assemble a semi-peripheral 2-rotor. This is my rotor. I love my rotor. I love both of my rotors. I have gone crazy packing these rotors. Not with fudge, no. With side seals, corner seals. I included a little kiss on this one. Now, if you guys know me well enough, you know that I caused that. This engine suffered a serious detonation from going too rich because a stupid ass wastegate line fell off. Those little PTFE white hoses inside the connector, and it went from 25 PSI or 35 PSI to like 20. And so the car went super rich, and I heard, poof. Normally that happens lean. Anyway, so there's a battle scar. I have since clearanced all of the side seals, corner seals, and apex seals. So what I mean by that is I actually straight up, this is not Rob Dahm fashion, I straight up made sure that all my apex seals can wedge in with that little bit of clearance. As I've been building motors more and more, I used to go to 7,000 because I knew that was the high end of the range, but you're gonna have a little bit more blow by, all that sort of stuff. Really, you don't notice too much, to be honest. I went down to 4,000, but anywhere between 2 and 4 is where I'm at now. Just giving you guys kind of an update on that. The apex seals that were in this engine, I'm trying all different types. The apex seals worked. They warped a little bit, and that's not necessarily unexpected because no apex seal can really do a good job protecting against a detonation. And there's one that warped more than the others. I'm gonna swap. You can see there it is, right there, the second one over. So it bent. It's kind of weird. It bent. A couple of them kind of bent a little bit, and they like molded. These are soft apex seals. They're in that range of non-breakable. They just bend, which is this saved my motor if you think of it that way. And then I cracked a corner seal related to this. Now, all the rest of the motor looks good. I've replaced, on this motor, because we just don't have time to mess around, I replaced all of these are apex seal springs. You can see I haven't, of course, done those yet. I replaced all of the side seal springs. They're hidden under here. The reason why is this motor also seemed to be that it had a side seal stuck. And that wasn't actually the case. I thought it was, but there's something else was going on. The corner seal being cracked definitely didn't help. On the 3-rotor, though, just for reference, if you crack one of these, it's broken. I had the 3-rotor running with, I think, 5 of these broken. If you do anti-lag really wrong or really aggressively, timing in general, if you time the motor wrong, you'll start snapping these. I honestly think that this is one of the greatest things to be a wear item in your motor. I kind of like it that way, because if your apex seals get stronger or less likely to break and just bend, they bend, the rotor dents in, but then this will always snap, and your motor will still run with these snapped. I kind of think that's the canary in the coal mine, but if anything, that's like, okay, now the engine's popped, but your engine's not blown. You can still run with it, but I wouldn't. It's like, okay, let's take the motor down. That's kind of been my current, I'm just giving you guys kind of an update on my current build process. This is the 2-rotor from the Rotary Vet. I want to give you guys a very quick but thorough explanation of the scariness I have right now. Basically traded for these semi-P housings. The problem with these are, they are weird. They're very weird. And so I want to kind of talk about this before, if the engine blows doing something really weird, I want to tell you that I had like a couple things where I'm like, should I run these? So first of all, you see a problem here? It's not even doweled. It is doweled, but the dowels aren't in. This is just the stock 2 bolts. The distance on this housing to the distance on the iron beneath it is off. That's stock. That is stock from Mazda, and almost all rotary engines are the exact same. You can swap parts from rotary engines. This is not good. And so that threw off my doweling a little bit because these holes are off. And so my doweling has to position itself off of these two holes to then cut these holes in the right spots. And so they were off a slight bit. So I remachined them looking at what the difference was, but even then, this is still wedged. So I just want to show you guys that. There was a lot of like grease, like packed grease in the both spark plug holes. Don't know what that means. If you are building a rotary engine, do not do this. Do not ever do this. This little hole right here, see that little, looks like a little dent? That's actually a hole. Most of you guys know what that is. That is the oil sprayer for oil injecting in most stock engines. All the stock engines have a little oil sprayer. OMP, you might hear it called. Well, look at this. What people will do is they will block it off, and this is a perfect exaggeration. These housings had long bolts. What do you want to do? You want to make sure this is blocked off, right? You don't want to have air come through there. You don't want to have oil come through there, fuel come through there. What do? You tighten it more. The problem is now you are taking these threads and fighting them against something that's bottoming out. Well, what does it bottom out against? The chrome, or the chrome area. And it bulges this area if you are very much a person like me who would want to over-torque them. Do not do that. Cut the bolt, get a bolt shortened, whatever the case is. Make a bolt that does not reach all the way to the bottom, or if you're really good, it does, but doesn't touch, it doesn't push down on there. That's almost impossible. So make short bolts that just block it off, because otherwise there have been cases where the apex seal hops over that and it wears that area out because you're putting pressure for no reason on there. So there were bolts that were torqued down, but I don't see any wear there. So I just want to point that out though. So other than that, thanks to Fritz from Lucky 7, he let us borrow his Pineapple Racing porting. So Isaiah ported the primaries a little bit more, and ported the secondaries more. What we're looking for is just a little bit more air efficiency, I guess. And we have the semi-P, so we should be good. Now this is very similar to our 3-rotor engine. 3-rotor uses Cosmo ports. Those ports are much bigger, so it breathes a lot more air, but this engine breathes a shit ton of air in and out. We're gonna go ahead and reassemble it. Nice little chill session you guys can enjoy with us. Pretty straightforward 2-rotor build. Same 5 dowels from before, and turbulence studs, and nothing else really done to it. Just like I did on the FC, I am going to be using Mazda's little oil sprayers in this place. Now I'm not gonna drill these out. The FC does have, it does have kind of low oil pressure at idle, which is fine because it's fine, right? But it sprays the shit out of the oil inside of the rotors, and guess what? Those apex seals haven't warped. So that was kind of my goal, is that can I run an engine harder and hotter, which is what Mazda was doing. These are meant to be the race ones. Spraying more oil into the rotor, hopefully is pulling more of the heat out of the rotor. Cast iron doesn't really move heat that well, so the apex seal is still kind of isolated in the air. So I'm hoping that these apex seals with the semi-peripheral also are cooled. So this is a formula I'm trying. I'm telling you guys to be very transparent. This is an apex seal. When they warp like this. You'll remember that though. The ends kind of bow up and the middle does weird shit. So what I'm trying to do is try and keep the temperature evenly across all this. And you can see it from this side over here. The apex seal never leaves this edge. The coldness of here is coming in on both sides. And so I'm hoping that, okay, the semi-P has a chance to cool the center of the apex seal. Because remember, the apex seal is also generating a lot of frictional heat. Not that that's like maybe that is the major source. I don't know enough about the engines to say that, but they're scraping along this outer edge, riding on hopefully some 2-stroke oil. But again, that hole has got cold oil and fuel-filled air. That could be good for the center of the apex seal. So between that and these, I'm trying to do it where these engines are race motors. Street motors, but race motors. So I'm not drilling these out for this one because I want to have higher oil pressure and make sure that the apex seal doesn't warp. These are the stock ones. I would not advise on removing all the internals and just running these. They're bigger than the holes I cut on mine, so at idle you would have even less oil pressure than I would, and so I would recommend against that. Because on the FC, I actually have the regulators all crushed down and everything. It gets great oil pressure at the top end. There's one part, 2 and 3, and it impedes flow or whatever. There's no way to really measure rotor temperature.
Nice.
Good job. See, you can already see. So take some of what I'm saying as theory, because clearly Mazda sells them, and that's the point of them, but it's not like I can, oh, hey man, I saw 5 degrees less. I don't. All I see is lower oil pressure. So I guess this means we're gonna endurance race this rotary vet. I want a seat time car that is a 2-rotor because I don't want to ruin the FC. I built it as what it was intended to be, a little late 90s, early 2000s track car, but it's too nice of a car. Love it too much. Rotary vet is born out of hate. Small like reliability and performance upgrade I do for the oil system. It's super cheap. You could make this yourself, honestly. I don't trust my own, but it goes in the front of the E-shaft, and what does that do? See this hole right here? That hole is a relief. Temperature gets you hot or whatever. I don't understand why you would have this, but it's blocking with a spring, and then normally the real one has like a thermostat essentially in it. Here's the other one. So it has all this weird shit going on inside of it. We're not gonna deal with that. Point is that it moves out, and oil that's built up in pressure in the motor just shoots out of this, spins, pisses oil out, reducing oil pressure. So we're blocking that off, so it cannot, under any circumstance, bypass the oil system there. We got the oil sprayers increased. We have the FD regulator crushed, so we have even higher pressure. And then finally, I'm gonna put 200,000, so 0.2 inches of shims on the front bypass as well. So we'll be raising oil pressure all the way across on this motor. You almost get to the point of just what's the maximum that the pump can do. If 40 PSI is what you get at idle, with all this locked down, that is what you get at idle. You can't get more oil pressure, so you'd have to make the pump bigger or something like that. That's most of these things are just to try and maximize the oil pressure and get what you get with the stock parts, which is still really good. So that's what we're doing. Just to point out the challenges I have with this, kind of more documenting it. This is just the 2 dowels, right? Stock. None of my work affects any of this. It'll pull this one from this one, which I don't want to do because the whole thing will fall apart. They're not aligned. Like that's a red flag, and I know that. But I also want my semi-P housing. So next thing I'm gonna have to do is work on making my own. Okay, so we'll hold that there. A little worried, but I've accommodated for it, so we're good. Every kiss begins with a K. Every rotary engine begins with a bearing. Don't worry, I know this isn't how it's supposed to go finished, but it's easier to set the rotor in for me. I'm a little bitch. Like Joel just said, there's a distinct color difference when it goes from used to not used. We're gonna stir it up this way. Whoa. And you were just saying that I wasn't gonna overdo it. I let you down.
I didn't have high hopes.
I still disappointed you. One of the very important things is I was using reusable coolant seals, and I'm going to get my money's worth, even though they're slightly degraded. The outer ones in some of these cases are actually unusable, but the inner ones actually look reusable. I find it very important that if a product is sold as that, I want to make sure it does that. I've got a couple different companies. I think I have Power Seals and Goopy. I think these are Goopies. It's all the same, honestly. Like different companies, they're different making them, but same seal. The outer ones don't survive as well. They like melt. It's kind of an interesting thing. Not exactly sure what's going on there. So this is more OEM-ish. Still feels the same. We're working to our advantage by pushing it over on the outside edge, not letting the Hylamar get in the way. And there we go. Looks much safer. Yeah, there's way too much Hylamar. Might be my problem. I wonder if the Hylamar is like getting into the groove when I compress them and pushing into the seal. Because check out what this does. Okay, so this is on rotor 1. I don't know if that makes a difference. That Swiss cheese right there is actually part of the rubber, whatever this is. And so it's kind of fine on this side. Clearly getting crushed and splitting out. I don't know if it's being crushed when it's being stalled, or it gets hot, expands, and then contracts and crushes it slowly and slowly worms its way out. I don't know. But that's what I'm watching out for. Using Valvoline. I can't keep calling the same guy out. He's my friend. But, you know, it's an honor to be using oil as my startup lube. So Hylamar on there. Normally I use the gray. So I use Vaseline. I guess it doesn't really matter. Nothing much matters.
You might have messed yourself up by doing that.
Yeah.
Maybe
that's the wrong O-ring. I had the wrong O-ring. Getting rusty, it's not good. So we'll put the correct O-ring in. I went through with the stone and made sure that all these surfaces were pretty flat. Now, I had no way of checking their absolute flatness, but I'm going to go ahead and assume. And actually, that might not be a good assumption with those rotor housings. There we go. So that's wedged inside of this. So one of my guys looked at this and he's like, hey, this is a 2mm hex. And he's like, you could probably use it for apex seals. I'm, no, that won't work for apex seals. Ends up being the absolute best tool, of course. It's great because it's flat on the sides, and so you can use this to square off corner seals mostly. And it's just slightly smaller than the cavity it's trying to get in there. So you can see how it's off on an angle. And just kind of give it a little doodah. There we go. That's squared it up. Squared up. It's actually not the corner seal as much as it's the damn spring behind it. It gets like hooked. It's very weird. So we are going to make sure we place this in a simple way. And then once it's on, you know my rule. Keep it where it's at. Just stay there. I'll go for the ultimate triple double, where both rotors have all three go down at the same time. That's the ultimate. So we're gonna go ahead and shut me up. What's the over-under on this? I don't even know what over-under means, to be honest. It sounds like a betting term. I feel pretty good. I feel pretty good that this is going to go triple down, nothing but net. I've trained for this my whole life. Not a single one. Not a single one went down. They look good because they're all the same. Damn it. Now this one, I'd rather err on gooping it up more because it's going to be upside down and in an engine that is going to be beaten. This one is not going to go anywhere while it's upside down. I refuse to have that happen. This is a multiple part process, and Joel does not believe in me. Joel's a hater.
I didn't say I didn't believe in you.
It's hard to hustle while your friends hate.
I didn't believe that you would do it well.
Oh, the E-shaft's right here. I have been working out, so I'm gonna need some forearm strength for this. This is not a multiple piece E-shaft, so we can grease this up without much worry. We will on that taper back there. Of course, we'll clean that off. Like that. This worked out to Joel's advantage. I forgot that's got a solid dowel on the top. That makes it way harder. This is true like arm strength here. So there we go. There. It had to slide that little bit more. I think every time I've assembled a two-rotor, I've said this is the worst way to do a two-rotor. So far, none of them have failed because of it, so there you go. Don't do it that way. It's good with two people, but there's not really an easy way when you have a solid dowel on there. It's truly so therapeutic working on these engines. So here comes one of the shitty parts of this. One or two on a normal engine, this should just line up and then fall on. That's where it's gonna stop on this one. We don't try and bounce it down too hard because it'll come back up. It'll just naturally do that. So there's a point where it doesn't help. When you're building longer engines and you have it held up over here, the whole engine starts to open on this side if you're not careful, especially if you start hitting it. So you gotta be careful for that. I don't feel confident in my E-shaft and rotor assembly skills. I don't think all three are gonna push down the apex seals. I gotta be confident. I gotta fake it till I make it on this one. Okay, two. What the fuck? Oh, it's on the exhaust port. Hang on. The exhaust is huge. We are on the tail end of this. So here are our dowel bolts. We're only gonna be using two of them because they're prototypes, and so we had some issues with them pulling them out. But you can see the issue here is that stock bolt, when you do this, they're about 15 millimeters less. We're gonna have to cut the second ones down because we're gonna just go with my two dowel bolt trick for the certain area. In full transparency, I'm gonna be using, these three are gonna be two sets of dowels with a turbulent stud through it, and these two are gonna be our special ones. This is gonna be a pain in the ass to do. I don't want the engine separating while I do it, so I'm actually gonna work on this one first because that's what will separate the motor most. Once that one's in, it'll make it a lot easier to work all of these over. Everything's aligned as much as it can be, but with these being way too tight, it's making my life a living hell. Okay, so I'm putting the second one on top of this one. And again, I'm gonna be holding the engine down here. Look at that, it's all lining up. You can see they're off a little bit. Again, that was because of the positioning of the lower dowel. It's in. Wow, okay. But not all that glitters is gold, apparently. I need to put like a nut on there. Okay. And then we can start screwing it in as we go. So these two I need to cut the other two dowels for. Oh shit, don't show them this yet. I'm the same guy that is willing to put my elbow right next to open drive shaft and drive with two drive shafts exposed, but I will never, ever mess around when it comes to protecting myself with an open, no guard, a cutoff wheel. That's terrifies me. That's Isaiah's, and I unfortunately had to use it. I love having the guard on there. This is a do as I say, not as I do. You shouldn't be doing this to your motor. That's how you put in press fit studs. Are we missing anything? I feel good about this, and that's
Put
not good.
O-rings on?
O-rings on the piece. These are on. It's gonna go upside down, and I'll put the oil pressure regulator on later, or I'll just forget it. Either one depends on my mood. Get them a good nice shot of this, because when we go and tear it apart, it's all in pieces. I want to remember this moment.
Okay.
Oh, I almost forgot. I went to caress it, and there was no new silicone. I'll cheer them up. Well, the good news is that I am hitting them gently and they're going down. So I'm not torquing the motor. I'm not putting the motor under tons of stress putting these in. So it is going to be nice, tight, snug fit, and I think it'll be okay. As you guys should know, this is an oil regulator. And I'm having a stroke. This is an oil pressure regulator, if you don't mumble. And the issue with these is that they are simply a spring with a plate or ball or whatever, and the amount of pressure that it takes to exceed that spring is your oil pressure. And so on this one, the spring distance is dictated by the inside of this right here, and the distance to the pin right there, which is the whole length of this. I guess it's more like a piston in this one. There's a sleeve that opens up, and this hole is where all the oil comes out of. You can either buy an aftermarket regulator. On FD, the stock one, which is this, is adequate enough, honestly. But what we're gonna do is shorten the distance of the spring by crushing this part down. Now, in the past, I've crushed them down quite a bit and had no problems with that. And on this one, we're gonna crush it down mildly. And by I say that, then I'm gonna end up not being mild. But you're simply causing this mushroom head to fold in. And so you can kind of see a nice before and after. That little bit of distance is all it needs, because that's a very, very tough spring. I got a little booby on the top of this. My other ones are actually pretty flat, pancaked on the top. But that will increase the amount of pressure it takes to overcome the spring. It's a shorter distance, so it takes more pressure to get to this point. That's really the thing. Some of the purists or the race guys are very weird about this, because they're like, well, now you've introduced a variable. Well, it's more. You know what I mean? It's not. I do have the Racing Beat one in the 3-rotor, and that's set calibrated, you know. But this isn't the only oil mod we're going to do to this engine, but it is certainly the biggest first step. This is a little harder to install like this, but not impossible. Yeah, that's not working. Thanks to Tang Tools, I have this sort of solution.
You gonna use a breaker bar?
That is a breaker bar. This is a breaker bar.
Oh, okay.
Not too many people are familiar, but this is also a pressure regulator. I shouldn't say regulator as much as blow off valve. If it gets way too much, this one would open up secondary. But if you increase the pressure on the rear one, this one may end up causing you to fall short of your goals. So we are going to take this off and add 0.2 inches of space onto the spacers, which is actually 2 washers. This is a aftermarket front cover from Billet Boss, but the same concept applies to the OEM ones. What it does is when you put the 2 things in there, it shortens the distance, which means it's under a little bit of preload, and it has to overcome even more force to open up. So that's exactly what we want. I found it instantly. We've got 2 little washers. They fit into the base of this. We boop it in like that, and so we have now increased the base pressure for this front regulator as well. A little bit of pressure. This is still aluminum. We've now shimmed everything, all the oil regulators, to make this thing hold higher pressure. The last thing that really is a bypass is this guy here that we showed earlier, replacing it with this. You guys know this part of the engine, or at least you've seen it a couple times, and I like to try to switch it up when we're doing these engines, because I always learn something new, showing you what it looks like without all of this stuff. And this is just the E-shaft able to slam all the way up and down, and so I don't know how many times it's going to spin. 1/8 of an inch of movement up and down. So that's the E-shaft physically hitting and wedging on each end of the spectrum, which is what we don't want. So all of this is training it to stay basically clicking back and forth. The E-shaft is now forced to slide between this like this and hit back and forth here with those bearings. So we're going to put this on first. You could almost machine the E-shaft like that. Bottom bearing, we'll put the spacer on. And this one actually has its number on there. So it's B, which is not a number. This thing isn't really directional, but you'll see a side that has more wear, and that's the side that goes down. Just so you see both sides, basically the same amount of wear. And so then that is that side. Okay, so he's spinning off of that. So we're gonna go ahead and put the rest of the stack on and then just tighten it down and then measure the end play. Let's see roughly what we get with how it's set up right now. That's what, 4 thousandths?
Yeah.
I like that. 3.5, 4 is good. I can feel it. I can feel that beep boop. So there we go. Being more professional. I'd rather have that way. I just don't want to get too far ahead of myself and replace the wrong parts. So we're going to go ahead and put that spring in there and put that in there because I would skip steps. Generally speaking, when you're using the metal gasket, I don't believe you need these. I've done it, I think, both ways. Don't build your engines based on what I do. It just fits in there anyway. It sits a little higher. That's probably why it's wrinkled there. For me, it's safety. Because right now what you're looking for is more surface area to protect it against. Because if you put this just down like this, it's still a decent amount of meat around it, but you got this recess right here, which I think some engines actually have that filled in. RX-8s or something along those lines. So we're gonna use the front bearing, front cover. So that'll help, and it really does. You don't see any wear on the front bearing right in here. You don't see any wearing from your alternator. So you can actually tighten your alternator even tighter if you want, but don't do it more than is necessary. But your power steering, a front alternator, all the pulleys benefit from you having a front bearing right there. A traditional E-shaft, I don't know if I need to put silicone here. There might be a ring meant for it, but this O-ring right here would lock inside the inside of there, and then this outer seal is meant for the outer seal. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this as is. This would seal on that outer edge. I guess the only thing that is if oil came out of here, if there was tons of pressure and came out of here, it could leak out.
So that's not the hardest thing to take out.
No, it's the very front of the motor, and it's not going to affect anything. I'm going to clean off that surface though, just in case we have to. On the rear ones though, that's especially on the 4 rotors and the custom E-shafts, you have to seal it because we had the problem with the 4 rotor destroying the 4-plate clutch because oil would come out from the E-shaft, the center of the E-shaft. Okay. Put that guy on there. So we'll see if it leaks. Okay, it is that time to finally hear it turn over for this motor all 6 times. Now I do have spark plugs here, so I'm going to take these out. These plugs were just to prevent shit from going into this bottom part of the motor. We're going to take those out, otherwise you guys are going to hear what sounds like 2 different rotors firing totally differently. Ooh. That didn't feel good. Uh-oh. Okay, we're going to take a look at that. This is a new one for me, is that the motor, as you saw in the previous shot, seems to hang up. And I was using a very short wrench. I never use that. Normally I'm using this one, and it feels more normal when I use this one, but it's got me spooked. I can still feel it happening the same time on a rotor rotation. So every 360 degrees, 2 out of every 3 times I feel it. And so it's not 100% consistent. That's why I'm like, okay, but again, I don't want to have this motor start running and then it nukes a side seal that I set up wrong or something like that. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to compression test this motor with the flywheel on, with the E-shaft nut on, with the bell housing on and the starter on, hot wire up a battery, and then just see if this thing can pass the compression test. Mind you, we heard some of the clicking while we were starting to twist it, and that's little nibs on the apex seals breaking off with the super glue. So very interesting. This is actually a very rather unique path to what's currently going on. One of the very first steps of making sure you compression test a rotary engine is to make sure that you have the throttle wide open. Well, in this case, we don't even have a throttle body or an intake manifold. So, step 1's done. Step 2 is we are going to install this into this. I want you guys to know I'm going to have a cool as a cucumber face on right now, but I'm terrified. We're firing up a starter. It's not going to start the car, but it'll turn the motor over, and it's going to be a little violent. And I don't think it's going to rock horribly, but
You're gonna hold it tight though, right?
somebody's got to do that.
I got the power.
Okay, and I'm going to focus on the lighting. So Joel, put the camera on a tripod and just hug this thing.
I saw a spark.
Oh, you know what? We have to have it go through there because that relay also kicks the starter out. So we have to have it go to this one. Okay, go
Ready?
for it. Yep.
Oh, it's smoking.
This caught too much amperage. Yeah.
It's too thin of a wire. Why that happened is, I honestly didn't think about it, is starter relay is not like a normal relay it's not like a normal relay that you get from like AutoZone or whatever. And this is not a normal wire. Very thin. A starter relay can use up to about 15 amps burst, or even to hold it. It's actually, the relay is also helping. I assume that the relay may be the part of the power that shoves the shaft outward into the gear, but it's like 5 wires. Hi, I'm Rob Dahm, and this is compression testing a rotary outside of the car.
Ready?
Yep. Nice. 112, 112, and 106. You do fist that?
Oh my god.
She keeps finding, every time we switch stuff up in the shop, she finds a new way to get back up to her little,
What happened? You hungry?
She almost died, dude. She like fell.
She must not have liked the sound of this engine. Yep, rotor 2's bad. There you go, 54, 90, 93. So there's something wrong with one face. So like I was saying, there was a potential that like a side seal spring got caught or something like that. We trusted our gut and we spent the time to do this because like I said, every so often it was getting hung up. So it's funny because I think it was an apex seal.
Has to be a side
So
seal.
it has to be a side seal. Something must be getting caught up on rotor 2. So the good news is rotor 2, so we can pull apart the engine halfway and we're not wasting too much time. Because we can leave the other bolts in, yeah, all the studs and everything can stay in. So the harder, scarier part of that, this is why it's important to not just hope it's gonna work. Okay, well, first step, there's nothing wrong there. Gotta count your blessings. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put a tow strap from the center of this housing all the way around to the front of the motor to the other side of the center of this housing. These are the bad spark plugs, so I don't even care if it hits the spark plug a little bit, but just enough to prevent the entire front of the motor from expanding when we take the rear off. Okay, so it's not on this side. So this is pretty fascinating. Nothing looks out of ordinary. Now that feels kind of tighter than these, but nothing seems wrong on this side. So the apex seals, as we heard and suspected we heard, did pop open. 1, 2, and 3. We have apex seals and apex seal springs to watch out for, as we did, when we're normally installing the motor. But I'm gonna go ahead and pick this up and try and bear hug it all. Okay, so I believe that Joel made a mistake on this motor, and I believe pretty strongly. Now, this is weird because the facts don't show this, so I'll explain my logic here. I believe that this apex seal slot is not properly finished like I should have done. This one is fine for the old apex seals. Even then it still wedges a little bit, and I cleaned this one up for a while. I think my mistake was I clearanced it and focused really on the top part, but not until it was pushed all the way in. And when it gets pushed all the way in, well, you see what happens. You can't pull it all the way back out. So here's my theory on this, is that when an apex seal is broken, cracked, you have 2 faces that now get lower compression. But I think what was going on is the motor, as it was sweeping up on the first face, the apex seal is down here, or whichever way you want to look at it, and it passes there, and then the next face. And so I feel like it was wedging and then freeing and wedging and freeing, because there's a slight bit, that's the whole point of spring, is there's a slight bit of change in the motor.
It was stopping us too when we had the resistance.
Yeah, it was wedging. It wasn't feeling like metal on metal, but it was the apex seal getting wedged, and it was actually coming loose, wedging, coming loose. And that's why once every 360 degrees, the apex seal is in the same spot. And these housings, as you've already known, are not my favorite alignment housings. That's my current theory. I feel pretty good about it, actually. At least pretty confident. I don't feel good about it. So I'm going to have to do some emergency surgery on this slot. A couple major things we figured out all at once. One is that the new apex seals are about 1,000 to 2,000 larger than the previous ones. So my previous ones are genuinely thinner. When I was scoping them out, I had used the old one for one of the rotors and the new ones for the new rotor, and I didn't do this one to the new apex seals. I really worked over, it's not that we didn't film it, Joel was running out and could just Baja Blast. It wasn't a secret. I just simply took these, or actually exactly 2 millimeters wide, and very carefully filed it down and then got it to a nice consistent thing, and then used my little thing here, and you can see this is 1.5 thousandths made sure that fit in there all the way. Now the apex seal has no problem. Even though one face was low in compression, which would normally mean a side seal, it was actually an apex seal. As it was running around here, it was being shifted, wedging in, and then on the next rotor face popping out. So it was giving us an incorrect piece of data. So really fascinating twist of events there. So we're gonna go ahead and reinstall this. This will tell us good or bad. No.
2 out of 3.
2 out of 3. Okay, I just tapped it. It was so close. Okay, so everything's looking spongy, happy. Well, here we go again. Thanks to Hylamar, we're just gonna keep this back on there.
Wait, tapping it.
Nope, too late. I wanted to, and then I realized it's gonna get tons of metal on this thing. It's actually better to put the metal into the coolant system than over the entire thing. Oh, nice. That's like you did us.
It was just a vibe, bro.
Yeah, it was a vibe.
It seems solid and consistent.
Yeah, I felt really good about that. That's a perfect example of listen, because I don't always listen. Some of you guys think I don't listen to the comments. I read all your comments, and I definitely absorb, and you guys have taught me a lot, so don't think that that's the issue. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know. But in this case, we just saved ourselves from horrible disaster from a simple pinching of
I think this was our 2 rotors last chance. I think if this would have been no more.
Yeah, no more 2 rotors. If we would have doomed ourselves and said nope, no more 2 rotors, because 2 rotors aren't our thing. I'm gonna make sure.
Is there like settings for that?
There's an app, dude.
Yeah, there's an app. So I have the app set up to currently do 350 to 400 foot-pounds of torque.
That's what we need, right?
Roughly.
Okay, perfect.
We're not gonna go any further because that.
Damn, that's strong. Yeah, that's good. You see the one thread?
Yeah.
That's how it normally is.
Yeah, that's on there. If it was a 4 rotor, I would have gone further.
That's not going anywhere. I'll tell you that. So we're just gonna double check our work over here because we're professionals and we somewhat know what we're doing. So it'd be stupid of us not to do this.
Here we go. Let's see how this thing runs this time. As long as we have even compression, I will be happy. Okay, 94, 90, and 85. Those are all within the same range. You can adjust it by adding oil and do all those other things to try and fake it or whatever you want, but the important part is one of those numbers is not 50. So the problem is solved, and we can put this motor in the engine. Motor in the car.